All right, so we're doing reviews to prepare ourselves for the FAA Knowledge Exam, Part 107, Knowledge Exam. Remote Pilot Certification Rules is what we're going to consider today, along with some test questions, practice test questions. All right, the first thing I want to talk about is aeronautical knowledge recency. Remember the rule says every 24 calendar months you must take a recurrent test. Basically, the FAA wants to know if you've been paying attention to the new regulations or whatever might have changed in the last 24 months. Also, the FAA is keeping track of all of the violations or boo-boos that remote pilots have been doing for the last 2 years, and if there's a specific trend, that will be on the test. For example, if people keep flying into controlled airspace, you can say the test is going to be heavy on that. So it's going to be an adaptable knowledge recency exam. There's two ways, by the way, to accomplish recency or currency. One is to take the initial test over again. You can do this test as many times as you want, or take the recurrent training exam, which covers knowledge areas specified basically like I just said. So there are two different ways to do that. I think at this point, the initial test is the average is about $175 to take the initial, and I believe the recurrent is free because they're trying to encourage people to do that. So it seems like a no-brainer. Yeah, just do the recurrent test online. All right, change of address. Holder of a remote pilot certificate with small UAS rating issued under this subpart who has made a change in permanent mailing address may not, after 30 days from that date, exercise the privilege of the certificate unless they've notified the FAA. So you may not get another certificate, but they need to know where you've moved. You can mail them a letter, or you can go to their website, faa.gov, and there'll be a place to change your address. Pretty simple. Let's see, operation over human beings. This is sort of a review because we did that on Module 1 there, or Launchpad 1. Basically, well, you need to be, at this point, you need to be telling me about this because this will definitely be on the test. But remember, there's those different categories. Category 1, 55 pounds or less, remote ID compliant, rotating parts protected. That's Category 1. Category 2 and 3, the manufacturer must certify the aircraft, unless you did a home built, and I think there is a way to self-certify. There's a process of turning in documents to the FAA to certify your drone. Not likely to be doing that, but the Category 2 and 3 are from the manufacturer. Nothing we can do about that. However, they may provide a aftermarket attachment to your drone, the manufacturer, that would make you compliant. Same with Category 1. Nobody has remote ID at this point, but hopefully the manufacturer will start punching those out. They've got a little time as well. Category 4 is for giant drones that carry giant loads of cargo across the Atlantic Ocean, that kind of thing. It's going to be, Category 4 is going to have an airworthiness certificate. It's going to have a minimum equipment list, just like an airliner, except with no people in it. No people flying in it. Could be people in it, conceivably, but no one able to touch the controls is what the rule is for UAV. And don't worry about, and that's not, we're getting a license for a small UAV, so we would not be able to fly a Category 4 plane anyway. Category 4 drone anyway. But do not be dismayed. You go to the airlines to get a manned aircraft job, and you don't say, I've got 100 hours in a 747 before they hire you. You don't have to worry about that. You just have to get some experience in something smaller and then go to the airlines and they do the training. So if you get some experience doing your small UAV operations and you apply for, once that's established, there's a company that has these giant drones, then they'll hire you and do the training and get you the license. Don't let that stress you out. All right, waiver requirements. And what I just said was just a review, by the way, about remote ID. If you need to, about flight over people. If you need to go back to number 1, Launchpad 1, there's a video there about that. Okay, so waivers and requirements, waiver policy. Administrator may issue certificates of waiver authorizing deviation from any regulation, those specific regulations listed in 107.205. if the administrator finds that the proposed small UAS operation can be safely conducted on the terms of that certificate of waiver. So you got to do the research. You got to come up with all these ways your thing operates going to be safe. You apply it to the FAA, and they want 90 days before they'll give you a word either way. Remember that a certificate of waiver, you'll need to provide a complete description of what you propose to do and how you justify it being safe. And the administrator might come back and say, yes, you can probably do it safely, but I also want you to do this, this, and this. So could be more. And some of okay, we have a Subpart E 107-200 Waiver Policy and Requirements. Remember that you have 90 days. They want 90 days. You come up with all the reasons why you think this you can. You want a waiver, all the ways that you can provide for safety and all of that, those issues. You provide all that information to the FAA, a complete description of what you plan on doing and how you can be safe doing this. The administrator might come back and tell you, yeah, but you also got to do this, so there might be some additional factors. When you receive that waiver, you do your operation complying with everything you said you're going to do and everything they tell you that you should do in order to maintain a safe operation. So, and there's a list of regulations that not every regulation can be waived, but there's a list of specific regulations that can be waived, like, well, it used to be night, and they're still over people. Now you did, since no drones right now are capable of obtaining those categories, and you can still do that now, get a waiver for flying over people. But that's that. Some of those regulations, by the way, before we get to this question, the list of possible areas where you can get a waiver is operation from a moving vehicle. However, you can't get a waiver for operating from a moving vehicle if you're going to be carrying property for compensation or hire. Let's see. Waivers can be applied for anti-collision lights at night. Waivers can be obtained for visual line of sight aircraft operation. Waivers can be obtained for a visual observer, for operation of multiple unmanned aircraft at the same time, waivers for yielding the right of way, waivers for operating in certain airspace, of course, controlled airspace. Operating limitation, operation over moving vehicles, you can obtain waivers for that as well. I imagine once we get, once the news reporting, traffic reporting stations start using drones for traffic reports, they're going to have to get some kind of waiver so they can fly over the interstate and tell you when the cars are bursting into flames or crashes or whatever. Okay, now to this slide. Which of the following individuals may process an application for a Part 107 remote pilot certificate with a UAS rating? It's got to be a, well, here's the answer right there. A remote pilot must be submitted to a flight standard district office or a designated pilot examiner or an airman certification representative for a pilot school or a certified flight instructor, which would be CFI or AGI, or another person authorized by the administrator to process the application. So, C would be the most reasonable answer to this question, right? Remember, of course, oftentimes you end up having to answer the most reasonable. Obviously, commercial balloon pilot. Why? Remote pilot command? No, that'd be you. No. So, let's see. Certified pilot changes permanent mailing address and fails to notify for a new address. Pilot is entitled to exercise the privilege of the pilot certificate for a period of only 30 days. We mentioned that earlier. FAA may approve your application for a waiver of provisions of Part 107 only when it has been determined that the proposed operation the A involves public aircraft. Remember, public aircraft like the police or Delta Airlines. They haven't started flying drones as far as I know. So that can't be it. C will be conducted outside the United States. Well, then why would the U.S. have anything to do with it? If it's outside the U.S., those rules don't apply. How about can be safely conducted under the terms of that certificate of waiver? Yeah, That's it. And you can pause if you want to read the whole thing, but I'm going to keep skipping through here so this won't turn out to be an hour and 45-minute video. All right. When requesting a waiver, the required document should be printed to the FAA at least how many days prior to the planned operation? And we mentioned that 90 days, of course. It could be quicker, but they need time. They have committees they have to get together and make these decisions. They can't just, one person doesn't necessarily do it, although it may, depending on the simplicity of the request. After receiving Part 107 remote pilot certificate with a UAS rating, how often must you satisfy recurrent training requirements? Man, I hope you remember this one, because I talked for like 5 minutes to explain it. Every 24 months. And interesting enough, it mentions there retraining can be satisfied by completing an online FAA recurrent exam. Or, of course, taking the original exam again, 60 questions. I think I'll do the online one. Satisfy medical requirements. All U.S. crew members must. Do we have to have a third-class medical certificate? No. Do we have to have a physical? C is wrong. It's got to be B. Free of physical and mental condition that would interfere with the safe operation. That includes drugs and alcohol, obviously. But that's self-certified. You are operating a 1,280 gram, which is 2.8 pound quadcopter for your own enjoyment. What FAA regulation is this U.S. operation subject to? Recreational, but Part 48 does require registration and marking for a UAS over 0.55 pounds, whether for work or for recreational flying. So B would be the answer to this. Part 48, don't often think about it, but Part 48 is the registration regulations, and it would be subject to Part 48. It's part of the FARs. You plan to operate a 33-pound UAS to capture aerial imagery over a real estate for use in sales listing. What FAA regulation is this UAS subject to? C is obviously wrong. B, 14 CFR 101, that may be a regulation, but I'm not familiar with it. It's got to be A. All right. Which of the following type of operators are excluded from the requirements in 14 CFR Part 107? Model aircraft, right? Quadcopters are UAVs. And on top of that, they're for hire. He's saying it's for crop monitoring, capturing aerial imagery for I presume that's for sale. UAS used for motion picture filming, right? But model aircraft is the answer. Model aircraft are included with amateur rockets. Moored balloons means there's a rope attached to the balloon, or even unmanned free balloons, kites, operations outside the U.S., public aircraft operation and air carrier operations are exempt from 107. Which of these operations must comply with 14 CFR Part 107? This is that little trick question that people get confused about. I'm going to talk about process of elimination again. C is obviously wrong. Military operations. We know that they don't have to pass the test and all that. Civil and public. We know that if we can't remember which is which, saying both of them can't be right either. It's got to be A. By process of elimination, it's got to be civil, and that is in fact the answer. Civil operation, that's you and me. Civil. Public doesn't mean the public. It means public as in the police department, the fire department, government agencies, the CIA, I guess. Yeah, I guess so. The FBI, all those organizations, they are called public operations. So Part 107 addresses the answer there. Part 107 addresses UAS operations of certain civil small unmanned aircraft within the national airspace system. Under what condition would a small unmanned aircraft not have to be registered before it is operated in the United States? We know that C can't be right because there are drones that don't have to be registered. B, Yeah, aircraft that's heavier than 0.55 pounds but less than 55 pounds, yeah, they need to be registered. Besides that, it's saying not including fuel and necessary attachments. That's a bogus statement. That can't be right, because the weight of a drone includes fuel and necessary attachments. So that could be right. It's got to be A, right? Less than 0.55 pounds untaken, including everything that's on board. That's the clue. And that's what it says. Yep. Answer B is incorrect because it's asking when the registration is not required. Answer C is incorrect because UAS must be registered if it's the device is between or is heavier than 0.55 pounds, period. So anyway, hopefully this has been helpful. I have office hours. Call me during office hours. Come by and visit, but make an appointment, because you know how I am. I'll be flying outside somewhere, and you might not be able to find me. But you can text me, and we'll try to come up with answers and help you understand anything that might be sort of vague. But these questions, this is not comprehensive. You've got to do some study on your own. All of these modules are just try to remind you of things we've done over the past couple months and we've talked about. But there's a lot of initiative that must be taken in order to keep up with and to prepare for this test. The FAA has that really marvelous study guide material online. You just need to know that. It would be really helpful if you know that dead. When we get into charting, mapping, and airport operations, it gets a little more complicated. The more you can remember without having to spend a lot of time trying to remember, it's be helpful. But these regulations is a substantial part of the exam as well. Okay, so anyway, like I said, give me a call if you need to.